until I hit the button.
It says continue. Are you sure you want to start the live event? Yes.
Oh, cool.
That's it started. It's live. That's awesome. That is really cool.
Right now, I don't believe that they can hear us.
Why is that?
Well, because the bit that's live with the red box is what they can see and hear.
that is your deck.
Yeah, and they can hear us, but they can only see the screen.
They can't hear us.
They can positive hear us.
Great, that's good then. I'm going to make a start.
Well, do you want me to make your face big?
Yeah. I don't know what you mean by big, but yes. And then I will hand over to you. All right. Wow, that's good. That's me. That looks like me. Wow. Well, welcome everyone. That was Martin and I doing a little bit of kind of figuring out exactly what was going on. So thanks for joining us this evening in the last of our events, closing out what has been an excellent month over June. Been really cool. And actually this evening, as you'll have noticed, we're doing a little experiment and we are trying something slightly different, just because Martin likes Teams and he prefers it to Zoom, but he and I have this debate all the time. So yeah, warm welcome to you if this is your first time. Thanks for joining us. We hope you'll have a great evening. We do typically use Zoom, as I say, but we're trying something different tonight. This is a live event using Teams. So I'm kind of figuring my way around the UI as well. So Martin and I are going to have fun with this evening. As you know, for those of you who've joined us before, we do have a code of conduct. In short, we ask that you are respectful to one another. We want everybody to have a harassment-free experience. We will do the usual community shout-outs at the end. In terms of the Q&A, we have a slightly different facility to Zoom, but there is a nice little option in the top there, which is the show Q&A, which is your facility to put questions to our speaker tonight. So please do use that to get your questions in, and I will relay them back to Martin. As ever, keep them coming in. Maybe we can pause at a couple of points and ask the questions, but it'll be great. And yeah, so welcome to Martin. Martin is well known to many of us. I have known him for some years. He's a very experienced and established Scrum.org trainer, amongst other things. He's also a consultant, does a lot of stuff in the Agile and DevOps space, and he's also a Microsoft MVP. I've trained with him twice and I had a thoroughly good experience on both occasions. I've also seen him speak on a few occasions, and yeah, we often have really good debates on various Agile related topics. This evening, he is going to share with us his amazing talk on Tyranny of Taylorism and spotting Agile BS, which I think I've seen before. So it's an awesome talk, and I'm sure you will thoroughly enjoy it. Martin, welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you very much, Safpal. I just for Saf, a little bit of logistics. I can't even speak. This is not a normal Teams meeting. This is something called a Teams live event. I think it used to be called Skype broadcast, and it's been rolled into Teams. We have kind of a weird producer setup here going on, where we control what you can see, which is different from Zooms or just a normal Teams meeting, where whoever's talking is the one that gets center stage. In this tool, we get to control it. So if you're not looking at the right thing, then it's either my fault or Safpal's, probably mine, because I'm kind of the one in control. We're just trying this out. I took this opportunity to try it, and it looks like a lot of fun. So Saf knows. If you look at the Q&A, I can thank you, Craig. Craig's just said that I'm a little bit jumpy. I'm hoping that will iron out a little bit as we go. My view is not jumpy, but I can see that the live view is getting a little bit jumpy. There's a stats bit I can see. It may be a megabits thing. I don't know. Let's see how it goes, and we will look at that. But Safpal, if you look at the Q&A, you'll see that there's new comments, there's published comments, and there's dismissed comments. So Jürgen just said good evening. Nobody else can see that Jürgen said good evening until it is published. I just hit the publish button, and now everybody else can see it, and we can reply to the questions. Does that make sense, Seth? Oh, you're on mute, Seth. You can't speak when you're on mute.
Very true. Yeah, I think I got you. You take
Cool.
it away, and I'll figure it out. Let's go with that. I'm pretty comfortable with that.
Awesome. So let me do this, which should send the slides to you. And then if I do this and this and this, then you should see both me and the slides. There we go. This should be an option somewhere for folks dialing in to add subtitles as well. I don't know how that works, but I think I set it up with Dutch, Welsh, and Spanish subtitles, I think. But you guys can let me know whether that is what you expect, or it's even working. So thanks for the awesome introduction, Seth. As I said, my name's Martin Hinchelwood. I'm Scottish, although maybe not. Those that are Scottish on the call will think I am not Scottish because I sound a little bit American. I lived in Seattle for 3 years as a consultant, so that's why I sound a little bit weird. But for those that are not Scottish, there will be no doubt in your mind that I am Scottish. It's one of those weird things. When you're from a place, people think your accent's weird. My grandmother has lived in Scotland all her life, and nobody in Scotland would think her anything but English. However, she goes down to England and people think she's Scottish. So that's the fun of accents. But I want to talk about it's two things, but I think they're related, and I kind of try and tie them together. One is the tyranny of Taylorism. I know there's a lot of Agile folks that come in to this event, so you'll know what I'm talking about by Taylorism, but I will explain it for everybody else. And then talk a little bit about how to detect when people are telling lies. There was a recent paper published by a very large organization. It was published in 2018 that talks about the things that have to be true, the minimum things that have to be true in order for an organization, a group, a team to say that they're agile. I like this list. Not everybody will agree with it, but I think it's an awesome list. So I wanted to share it with you. And there's a link in the slides for you to access the actual document, but you can Google for it and find it as well. So let me. The first thing that I just want to caveat the situation, the reason that this document exists, and it's from a very unlikely source. I'm deliberately being obscure with that. But that's that 81% of all development shops worldwide say that they're agile. This is from Forrester Research. So even back in 2017, 81% say that they're agile. I would like to assert that almost 81% of them are lying. That's what I would like to assert. I think they're trying to serve us a nice little turd pie for our consumption, and they're just making it up. And the reason that I think, apart from long experience working with companies, I'm sure a lot of you are the same, one of the reasons is that only 22% of those 81% that were surveyed are doing short iterations. And by short, it means shorter than 4 weeks, 4 weeks or shorter. So obviously, from our perspective, or depending on your thoughts on this, that doesn't sound very, very agile. It sounds a little bit long. What about that only 16% of them have an ordered backlog? That does not sound like something that we want for our agile teams, or even that only 6. I went the wrong way. only 13% do retrospectives. If you're not doing retrospectives, I think retrospectives are a fundamental part of agility. You can't really be doing say that you're agile unless you're doing some form of inspect and adapt, unless you have some sort of feedback loops. This is the source data of that. You can go find it online. I just highlighted the bits that I thought were important. And actually, while researching for this slide deck the first time I was presenting it, I happened upon this post. I have no idea who Brian Wang is, but he had a very astute thing to say, and it's really just the reality. Most organizations, while even if they look awesome from the outside, are not a lot of fun on the inside. I worked for Intelligent Finance back in the day. If anybody remembers Intelligent Finance out in Livingston, yes, Safpal is doing a face. I worked for them for was it 5 weeks? I think it was 5 weeks. I quit after 4 weeks. And I was the shortest employee ever, and it was just appalling, the level of just what was going on inside. It just beggared belief. And that was early in my career when I didn't actually know better. So we've seen that it's hard to change, that it's difficult for organizations to make this difference. But I think it's worth investigating a little bit on why. A lot of people attribute it to waterfall, but unfortunately, that's only the tip of the iceberg. Waterfall is just the start of our problems. It's not the source, or it's just the bit we can see at the top. And we'll all have seen something that looks like this: requirements into design, into implementation, verification and maintenance. And this is not just something that's applied to software, it's something that's applied in many other different systems, many traditional manufacturing processes, traditional organizational processes, having departments where you hand things off between those departments. The analogy I use for the non-software world is contracts, signing the contract that then results in work. You have a salesperson who convinces the customer that this is what they want to buy, and then they're done. They hand off that information to the contracts team, who then negotiate the contract, and they're completely separate. They're measured completely differently and don't care about the sales folks. They also don't care about the other people down the line. Their only concern is protecting using a contract. And then they hand that off to the next group of people that may be involved in that process. So that's still departments. It's still pushing things along. So it's worth asking ourselves, why do we work that way? Where did this way come from? Well, we kind of need to go back in time. We need to go back in time about 130 years to the 1880s. So let's get a little time travel there. We're now in the 1880s. And just before the 1880s, the world was a very different place, especially for building products. We weren't building products at scale, for sure, so there was definitely that difference. But also, we tended to build our products and work very close to where we lived. And if we had a problem, we were the only ones there to solve it, or we got somebody in to solve it. And for example, if you were the cobbler making shoes, you had a mastery of what you were working on. So you not only were building the whole shoe, but you understood the purpose of that shoe, and not just of a shoe, because I'm sure we can all assert the purpose of a shoe, but what about the specific individual for which you're buying that, or making that shoe. If you're making a shoe for a farmer, or making a shoe for the local police officer, or you're making a shoe for a storekeeper, there's going to be a different set of requirements. And if you, as the cobbler know that person, you have a much bigger, greater degree of a connection and affinity to those things. So you can build a better shoe because you care. You care about the person, you understand their needs, you understand how their needs differ from others, which is very powerful. But then the Industrial Revolution came along, and a lot of money was made. That's, you know, a lot of people get jobs, a lot of money was made, people's living standards changed. For many people, that meant increasing their living standards, albeit that my great-grandmother started work in a cotton mill at the age of 8. However, living standards did go up, even if some of the principles did not. But if you look at these pictures and ask yourself, what does the person at each individual station understand about the product, what it is, how it's going to be used, who's using it? Do they even need that understanding? The system here in a factory floor is set up in such a way that you do not need that level of understanding in order to build your product. You're effectively Charlie from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory's dad. You're screwing the top on toothpaste bottles for a living, and that's it. There's no more, there's no less than that. So the difference between these two is very stark. On the left, we have a craftsman taking pride in their work, who understands their customer, works with them constantly. It's probably not the first shoe, the first of that same product they've built for the same customer. Therefore, they have a greater degree of understanding. Whereas the people on the right, just they don't care. They have no connection to the customer. They've got no connection to the work apart from I get paid at the end of the day. And because of that only connection being I get paid at the end of the day, there's a disconnect that happens. We disengage from the process. We just don't care anymore. That's a human thing. If we don't understand why and we don't understand the context, we don't really care about the work so much. So this mechanization of the workplace, because we didn't have the technology to have robots back then, this mechanization of the workplace, we had to use people instead of robots, resulted in something called soldiering, which is a different use of a word that we're maybe more familiar with, but it really just means to work more slowly than one's capacity, or to loaf or malinger. I don't know how to translate. I don't know the words for that in Dutch or German. It's basically people not wanting to do the work. You just don't care. I'm going to figure out how to work less. So I've got a little exercise for everybody. Luckily, there's a lovely URL, which I will see if I can just copy, if I can figure out how to get to my slide deck while I'm looking at this. It's on the other screen. And I will copy the URL. I'm sure some of you will be able to type it quicker than I can copy it, but we will put it in the chat. Let's make an announcement. URL for... There we go. I just pasted a link into the Q&A. If you use that link, it will open in a browser. And in that browser, you will have this thing called Mural. You may or may not have used it before. If you're, oh, there's a few people in already. I can see folks coming in. It's just fine to click and go in anonymously. You'll see yours and other people's mice floating around all over the place, and you can zoom in and zoom out, and try not move everything around. Let me just quickly lock that. I must have left it unlocked. Lock. There we go. That we can't drag about the thing now. I'm going to give you a little exercise. We're going to pretend that we have been hired by a paper mill owner to improve productivity lost due to people disengaging from the work with this soldiery to work more slowly than one's capacity. I'm going to put 2 minutes on the clock, and I'm going to ask you to create post-its for as many ideas as you can. Now, if you're wondering how you create a post-it, you just double-click anywhere on the screen, and it will create a lovely post-it that you can type in my first idea. Whoa. There we go. Well, apart from I can't spell, but that's a separate problem. What I'd like to do, I'm going to put 2 minutes on the clock. Oh, ping. 2 minutes are on their way. And I'd like you to create as many ideas as you can on that post-its for how could you as a management consultant defeat soldering. And remember, this is the 1800s, right? We don't have politically correct. We don't have be nice to our employees because that's a good thing, or you'll get outed on Twitter. We have do whatever you want in order to facilitate you getting the results that you need. So I'm hoping for as many ingenious ideas as possible. Are you adding some stuff, pal?
Rushing for my unmute. No, I am busy facilitating this event, doing other things. I will not partake in your exercise.
Oh, that's sad.
I will leave our lovely attendees to do that and share their amazing ideas with you.
There is about a minute left. I'm going to open another browser window, but the minutes will stop counting down. And there we go. Oh, I like this. So we've got gamification, no toilet breaks. Yep, that's a good one. Or just record toilet breaks. You have to record the toilet breaks and then have some sort of punishment for people that take too many toilet breaks. Pay per unit by time, fire the slowest 10%. It's definitely something that can be done. Bonus for hitting targets. No recreation area. Yeah, people will tend to find a recreation area if you don't provide one. But yeah, shout at them to work harder. These are all fantastic ideas. There's about 5 seconds left, and then I'll pull that up over here. Cool. Let me pull that up over here. There we go. So we got a lot of crazy ideas here, but really, are they that crazy? Somebody I know used to work in a call center, and this is 5 or 6 years ago, and they had their toilet breaks monitored, and they got called in for a meeting if they spent too much time on toilet breaks. It's a pretty common in the call center industry to do that. What have we got? Pay by product, bonus for hitting targets, breaking down work into a series of steps. That sounds pretty good. We need to plan all the steps. Give them a beating if they're malingering. I think that's definitely a good idea. Sack them and hire new ones. Yeah, I mean, all of our workers are cogs in a machine. Yeah, they're not high-skilled labor. We can train anybody to do this work. So if somebody's not doing the work well, there's 100 people waiting at the door for a job. These are all really good ideas. Yes, I like that one, Seth. Promote bastards to be supervisors. That is definitely something that you would see. And in fact, some of these ideas that you've come up with are fairly hit on the nose. Let me jump into something here. There's a gentleman called Frederick Winston Taylor. He was the thought leader at the time. He was our Craig Cockburn of the time. And he said his hypothesis was that hardly a competent worker can be found who does not devote a considerable amount of time to studying just how slowly they can work and still convince their employer that they're going in a good pace. That, I think, if you think about it, that is the fundamental basis for traditional management practices. Your workers are being nefarious. They are not intent on working, and we need to figure out carrot and the stick. How do we make them work? So he came up with this thing called the scientific management method. And all of the ideas that you wrote down were kind of part of his thinking. He developed standard methods for each job, break it down into a set of steps, plan all the work, divide workers into appropriate ability-based groups is collecting all the marketing people together, all the contracts people together, all the legal people together, and they're just going to do that work. Train everybody in just the standard methods, so we're going to plan everything that they do. Remove thinking, because we don't want people coming up with new ideas. Managers are smarter. We're going to tell you how to do your work. And then have wage incentives for increased output. And if that wasn't bad enough, he had a disciple called Henry Gantt. Yes, that Gantt, who came along and he created the task and bonus system. So we're still talking 1800s, task and bonus system. Basic wage based on expected low performance and bonuses for exceeding expected proficiency, and give bonuses to managers for motivating their staff to exceed proficiency, promoting bastards. That's exactly the outcome that's going to happen there. I worked for an organization in Glasgow called Agile. They're over in the East End of Glasgow. They're a very good company, but they did have golden handcuffs. They have a 40% bonus system. They pay about 15% below the average for that job in the industry, and then they pay out up to a 40% bonus system at the end of the year. So you want to hang around for that bonus, and you want things to do well. Something else that drew my attention is that we have this thing called the modern school system, and don't be confused by the word modern. I'm using modern school system as a noun, even though I kind of forgot to capitalize it, the word modern here, but it's a noun. It's this idea that rewards for fulfilled tasks, everybody sits in rows, everybody does the same thing at the same time, and incentive-based learning. And I would ask, what's the difference between these two pictures and how you motivate people? The modern school system that most of us on the call today, and my parents, the school system that we grew up in, was designed to train factory workers, to train people to work in factories. Okay, these systems were optimized for output, not outcome. But it didn't stop there. In 1908, Harvard started, well, I guess it was before 1908, but 1908 was the first graduation class of MBAs. And you can see there's definitely a lot of white males there, but that's the MBA graduating class of the time. And they were taught these practices, these are the fundamentals from which you need to build your business, you need to build your employee structure and manage people. So we ended up with hierarchical organizations. In the 1950s, they started really heavily into this idea of analysis, design, implementation, testing, and maintenance. And you can see on the right those new ways of saying the same thing that was said in the 1800s, but this is in the 1950s. And then the largest purchaser in the world took on this concept, which is the US military. The US military industrial complex is enormous. You would not believe how big it is. I have some stats in a little bit, and it's just enormous. They took on this new way of working. They enshrined it in the way they do things, and it just became part of their procurement processes. Just became part of their procurement processes, and it became part of many other organizations' procurement processes at the time. You can see the folks there are building clocks. Once it was enshrined in part of the procurement processes, it's just the way we do things. And then we kind of tried to apply it to software development, and things did not go very well. We were trying to apply management practices that were designed for the predictive world to this new empirical world where the only way we figure out if something can be done is by doing it. We can't plan everybody's work up front. So hopefully most of you are already familiar with these ideas, moving from predictive management practices over to empirical management practices. I don't want to go into them all, but that idea of autonomy, mastery, and purpose, once you take money off the table for people, carrot and the stick no longer works, and in fact has a negative impact. So if you as an individual have your extrinsic motivations, or you have a roof over your head, you have food, you have a roof over your head, and you have those things sorted, then you're not so worried, and you're not worried about money, like where's my next meal going to come from, then carrot and the stick no longer has a positive impact. If you read Dan Pink's book, Drive, or just watch the 15-minute YouTube video if you're not a reader. Is that you, Seth? You a reader? He's nodding. Cool, he's a reader. Read the book. It has all of the background. If you just don't care, watch the video and just assume that everything is true. But if you want the data, you can go read the book. So obviously, this has put everybody in that position of these hierarchical organizations, which we're all familiar with, departments, silos, and procurement practices that force us towards that world and having big budgets up front and these big projects. So who would be the least likely person to understand how messed up the world has become because of these things? I'm going to give you a hint. They have a $738 billion budget and 2.8 million employees. That's direct employees. That doesn't count consultants, contractors, and all those third-party people. It is, in fact, the US Department of Defense, who they didn't start this mess, but they definitely enshrined it in all the ways that we work. They made it much more popular than maybe it needed to be. But they are trying to clear up their mess. What they found was that as they moved towards Agile practices, they realized that Agile just becomes a buzzword of software development, and therefore all software projects suddenly declare themselves to be Agile. So they released this guide called the DIB Guide Detecting Agile BS. It was shipped out in 2018 to all of their procurement officers, anybody in the US military, the Department of Defense, who was responsible for, who had purchasing power, in order for them to understand what it looks like to be Agile, so that they have a litmus test to negate doing the contract with somebody. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 questions. Okay. I usually ask folks to stand up if I'm doing this as a big room event, but obviously you can't do that. So what we are going to do is I am going to just ask those questions, and what I'd like you to do is imagine you're standing up in your mind, and I want you to sit down in your mind when I say something that is not true for your team. I'm hoping there'll be a lot more folks standing up at the end of this session than I would normally get at a software development conference or in a private organization. Okay. So the first question I have is, are your teams delivering working software to at least some subset of real users every iteration, including the first, and gathering feedback? So I'm going to caveat that a little bit. I'm going to define what they mean by real users because it's defined in the document. Real users is production. Real users are people who will be using your product and using it in anger. Yeah. UAT does not count as real users. Pre-production does not count as real users. Some subset of your users have to be using it in production for this to be true. I wonder how many people sat down in their head. Because if you don't have this, then it's not Agile. It's Agile BS. Second question, is there a product charter that lays out the strategic goals? Do all members of the team understand, and are they able to see how their work contributes to that overall success? Because if not, it's not Agile. People who are doing the work need to understand the whole context so that they can make better decisions. Okay, are teams empowered to change their processes based on what they learn? I'm hoping everybody who's attending here would be able to say yes to that one. But if it's no, it's Agile BS. It's not agility. Is feedback from users turned into concrete work items for sprint teams on timelines shorter than 1 month? If not, it's not Agile. And are teams empowered to change their requirements based on feedback? You've got to get that feedback integrated into your system, otherwise you're still not going to build the right thing. So if not, unfortunately, it's not Agile. And then the one that I find, even if I have folks still standing up at this point in a conference, is the full ecosystem of your project Agile? Agile programming teams followed by linear, bureaucratic deployments is a failure. It's not Agile. You need to have an end-to-end process in order to say that you're doing agility. Now, while this is from the Department of Defense, I would stand behind all of those statements and say, if you are a team working in the Agile space and the answer to all of those questions is not an absolute yes, a resounding yes, then you're unfortunately kidding yourself on, and it's not as Agile as you would like it to be. This is the diagram that is in the document. You can go download the Detecting Agile BS. If you just Google Detecting Agile BS, you will get that information. I think it's awesome. So funnily enough, I used to get people coming up to me and saying, Agile's only for small projects. It doesn't work for big projects. That's what I used to get probably 5-10 years ago. Now I get people coming up and saying exactly the opposite. Oh, Agile's only for large projects. It's not for small projects. This data here is from the Standish Group in Boston, who analyze about 70,000 projects worldwide. They do a chaos report every year, and something they found was that Agile practices on small projects are 32% more likely to succeed. I'm going to define small for you because their definition of small is not the same as mine. Their definition of small is 50 people or less. So for me, that tends to be big, but that, 50 people or less is small. But large projects get 600% more likely to be successful. And that's due to the extra levels of complexity as you add more people over 50. So if you're moving towards your journey of agility. Is it a good idea to go look at what everybody else is doing to get ideas on how you might make changes and the next thing you might do? Absolutely, you should be doing that. You should be looking at all the different practices and experiences that everybody's having, your colleagues. Come to sessions at the Future of Work Scotland and learn ideas and then try them and see if they work for you. However, you can't use somebody else's process. You can only be inspired by it. If you are just taking somebody else's process, and I know newer versions of SAFe are a little bit more flexible than they have been in the past, but SAFe was designed and built by Dean Liefenwell in one company and then used as a blueprint in other companies. That is inherently not agility. It was for the first company, but then for each subsequent company after that, it's not. Many companies come to me and say, oh, we're doing the Spotify model. And I'm kind of like, what's the Spotify model? There is no such thing as the Spotify model. There was a white paper written by the folks from Spotify that talked about their point in time on their journey towards agility, their agile evolution, their continuing evolution. Here's what we're doing right now. Spotify are not doing anything like what's in their white paper anymore and haven't done for a very long time. It's just a point in time. They were on their journey. They were just trying to give people ideas. So if you're just installing somebody else's process, you are not being agile. And I found something really interesting online. I found this memo. This is the result of the memo. It's like a clarifying slide, but it talks about them. I actually have a copy of the memo, but it's not really that interesting. This has the interesting stuff in it. This is from the chief of chief of software operations, or the person who runs IT for the U.S. Air Force, and he said they highly discourage their folks from using rigid prescriptive frameworks such as SAFe. They point out that SAFe might be potentially useful for teams who don't have DevOps, but it will inhibit teams using DevOps. It'll inhibit their ability to move towards high degrees of agility. And they point out that SAFe isn't used by any successful software commercial organizations. If you can think of one, please let me know. I would like to make sure I caveat this with the correct thing. We got lots of smart people here at Future of Work Scotland that have lots of experience. I have never seen a large successful software commercial organization using SAFe, nor the Spotify framework. Well, apart from Spotify, obviously, but they're doing something different now. I think that's a very telling piece of information. DevOps and Agile are not magic bullets. They're not the thing that is going to save the day for you. Sath, I just put the Windows flag on the cat just for you, because I know you're always commenting on my comments on Microsofty stuff. But we can use some of these capabilities that we find in agility to help improve our processes and practices and make things a little bit better. But something that's really important, and my good friend Russell Miller mentioned it, why buy a counterfeit when you can afford the genuine article? Why would you go install somebody else's framework that was built for their culture, for their organizational context, for their business processes? Build your own. Every large, successful organization that has moved towards agility has done so by creating their own process based on their individual needs. And how do you get there? One step at a time. Just find the first step you can take and take that step to get there. So thank you very much. I actually forgot to update that link, Sath. Sorry about that. But you will get the presentation from that link if you want to copy the slides. Are there any questions, Sath?
Not a great deal come through, Martin. I'm just sifting through because I've got a couple at the end. Okay. So if 81% of all teams are doing BS Agile, it's about tongue in cheek. Have the US military limited their engagement to 19%?
That is a really good question. So I didn't say the US military were doing it well. This was they're trying to educate folks inside of the organization so they can see when they're making good decisions and when they're making bad decisions. I'm sure there are circumstances where they're between a rock and a hard place, and I can either choose the doesn't meet the Agile requirements or the doesn't meet the Agile requirements, and I have to pick one. So they are working closely with their vendors, with their providers to help improve agility with them. But those practices are currently required by the Department of Defense's procurement rules. So technically, if a vendor is not agile, not doing continuous delivery, is not providing them with a usable increment, even of a missile system on a regular cadence on timelines shorter than 1 month, then they are breaking the contract that they signed. So maybe they're not limiting their engagement, but they can certainly sue the crap out of them for not meeting the requirements. So that's an interesting one.
Yes, here's a good one. It might spark a little bit of thought, I'm sure, within the group and for yourself. So if each new system of working solves the problems that went before, and what are the problems that Agile can't solve? So we can see what might come next, other than maybe just doing Agile properly. I like that. Thanks, Craig.
Yeah, I do. I like that. Craig always has very good insight, and I think that it's a valid statement to make. I don't know if we can answer that question because we don't know what we don't know, I guess.
Yep.
But I maybe I'm wrong, and I'm perfectly happy for Craig to correct me. Maybe I'm wrong, but my understanding of agility is it's moving from a model where things are rigid because we have a defined world. Yeah, our manufacturing production line, or our building 300 houses, or making clocks on our factory floor, and we're moving from that world towards a world where we need an empirical process control system. We need to be able to adapt our reality, our way of doing things to the realities that are happening for us as a business, as an organization. And agility, for me, just means moving towards that model so that we can accept change. So isn't agility the vehicle through which we can adapt and come up with new ideas for whatever's coming down the pipeline? So I'm not sure that we maybe need anything else. Maybe doing agility properly is something we should be doing. But again, I disagree with the word properly. I don't know about anybody else, but I don't think there's one way. I think saying doing agility properly is kind of like, well, we all do SAFe, or we all do this one thing. I think it's different for every organizational context, and everybody has to make up their own way, which means incrementally and iteratively moving towards the outcome that you want.
Yeah,
I think it's like it's
related point, but just while you're kind of covering that bit off. So let's have a question, but I think it could be a question of sorts. So the problem isn't the frameworks. I think a lot of us would kind of agree with that. I know SAFe takes a bashing, right? And you and I've had that conversation a few times, but it's the McKinseys and the BCGs and the Bains putting the work the work, the frameworks in, because that's what the management wants to buy, right? So it's the way these things are positioned and sold, and I think that's a big part of it, right?
I totally agree, and it's there's not really a light at the end of that tunnel. They're not going to magically get it, as long as executives in organizations don't care enough to understand the problem. They will always just want to buy their way into a solution. And that's just the reality. I firmly believe that those companies will not go anywhere. Yeah. I think of it as it's like Darwinism. Animals grow into the niches that are available that they can optimize for, and companies do the same. Companies fill a niche. If that niche changes enough, then the company has to change. If the company can't change, they go out of business. So those organizations that adopt change, adopt models that allow them to adapt to those changing circumstances, will survive. And I think the world today changes much more quickly than it ever did before. So they need to change too. One step at a time. Yeah.
Indeed. I've got one for you here, which might play nicely to your Scrum and Kanban training for sure. Can you share what you qualify as the first sprint? So I don't want to get in a sprint zero discussion, but what work would you allow to take place before sprint one? E.g., new team deciding what needs, research, experiments, understanding the customer for a new offering, team coming together to understand the problem and look at the data. Here you go. The floor is yours.
That's a really good one. I like that one. So
I know you do.
What I would normally say, if you're at the point where you have a team because you're contemplating sprint one, I'm going to make a little bit of an assumption, and I'm going to say you've had to do enough to convince somebody to give you some money. Okay, so you have an idea about what niche you're trying to fill with this new product, this new thing that you want to do. And I would suggest just get the team, if you have the team, together with the product owner and decide what's the first thing that you could do. What's the first thing that you could test? What's your hypothesis? If we make this product, this is the behavior change that we would see. This is the measure that we're going to use whether we're successful. What's the smallest thing that we can create that will meet that measure? And you're trying to find something that's small enough that you can do it in 2 weeks. If you've got a team of 5 or 6 people, there are very few things you can't have some basic concept of in 2 weeks. Yes, you're going to spend a lot of time in infrastructure, building architecture, building servers. But if you're using, one of the classes that I teach is the Professional Scrum Foundations class. In the Professional Scrum Foundations class, I break everybody up into teams and I give them a backlog it's an animal website, right? So they have to build an animal website. So they have stories like, have you been through this one, Seth? No. So we have stories like, it has to be generally attractive. It has to have a homepage. It has to have these types of information. It has to have pictures and an image gallery and all these kind of things. So there's a backlog of information. And we just give the teams the backlog and we don't give them any instructions about how to go turn that into a working product. We give them 30-minute sprints, so 30 minutes of engineering inside of the sprint. And I have almost never had a team not be able to create something by the end of the sprint. And that's a 30-minute sprint. And I'm going to caveat that I had one team, which I would love to work on this team. I had one team of 5 people that by the end of the first 30-minute sprint, having never seen the requirements before and just picked their animal mascot for the team, okay? they managed to create they were using Visual Studio. They created their website in Visual Studio. They had it stored in a Git repository. They had an automated build system created to pick up those pieces from the Git repository, build it into a cohesive product, and deploy it to production in Azure in 30 minutes. Team of 5 people. What could that group of people do in 2 weeks? I think it's less about what can we create, but what can we create in 2 weeks? Give them the first thing and let them play for 2 weeks. Do you know what that gives the product owner? It gives the product owner 2 weeks to go come up with the next most important thing. Just get started, I think, is my suggestion.
Absolutely. Got a really good one for you here. I love this.
Oh, okay.
If you are stuck in Agile BS, what steps might you start to take tomorrow to get out of it and into a less BS world? Love it.
Depends which of the BSs you're in, I guess.
Oh, that's true.
But so the thing I see as the biggest BSs in Agile, apart from, and I'm talking about a team, there's a whole bunch of product owner, product value BSs that organizations seem incapable of understanding value. But that particular question, if we're inside of a team, if that team is not able to create a usable increment, so what the minimum bar for Scrum is transparency. We need transparency. That's part of our, to have an empirical process control system, we need transparency. The increment at the end of the sprint, a usable increment that is production ready, might not be deployed to production, but is production ready, is the minimum bar for doing Scrum. If you don't have that, you're not doing Scrum yet. You don't have transparency. You've got the product backlog, which gives you transparency of the future. You've got the sprint backlog, which gives you transparency of the present, and you've got the increment, which gives you transparency of the past. That is the whole purpose of Scrum. We have those transparencies so we can see what's going on. So I think the first one I would focus on is understanding what our definition of done should be versus what it is. And every single sprint, every single retrospective, look at that diff. Here's where we should be in order to create a potentially releasable, shippable product. Here's what we can do. What's the next thing we can do to close that gap? That's what I would start. That's where I would start. But then my background's engineering, so I would start there.
Yeah, well, that's good. So, in your experience, what aspects of senior leadership, stroke management are thwarting today's efforts? And obviously, I know that'll vary again. And which are supporting them? So I think that last bit's quite interesting.
The ignorant ones are thwarting us, and the enlightened ones are enabling us. It's really that simple. There are a bunch of folks in organizations that don't understand why Frederick Winston Taylor's thinkings are a bad idea. They don't understand that because that's all they've ever known. So they're looking at what you're suggesting to them from a position of ignorance, and they're looking at that and they're thinking, I can't operate in this world because I don't understand it, therefore I will lose my job, therefore I need to get in your way. That's really what's happening. The thing that changes that is education. Same as thwarting ignorance anywhere, whether it's government ignorance or people ignorance, you need education. That's so Safpal, that was definitely a lead in. I have a professional Agile leadership class.
You do?
I do, just coming up on the, oh well, actually I think that date's wrong. It's on my website. I think is it the 29th of June?
I was going to say, you hope that date's wrong, right? Because that's Monday.
Yeah, it's not that one. It's after that. I moved it. That's what it was. So it's not that date. It's the week after, maybe. I think it's the week after. Anyway, it's on my website, so you will see it there. So just Naked Agility. If you Google Naked Agility, you'll not find anybody else. Although you find some scooters. There's naked scooters. I don't get it, but there we go. But if you find that class, we're doing it over 4 days, 8 a.m. till 11:30, so that managers can attend, so that those people in leadership positions who won't turn up to a 2-day class can actually turn up, because they're finished by 11:30 every day. And I have 2 people signed up from Singapore, so
Nice.
I'm looking forward to that class. I just thought I'd throw that in. That's just the sales part.
No, it's all good. We're happy for you to do that. Also happy to share the link to your, well, you've revamped your website, right? I've still not had a chance to look at it. I know you did it for me, but
I did it because of the new normal. I wrote a couple of posts. Yeah, we're doing virtual training now. So instead of focusing on location, we're focusing on time zone. Yeah. So if I did the first thing I thought of when the folks from Singapore signed up was, is that inside of their time zone? Mm-hmm. And it's 2:30 till 5 p.m. for them. So
right.
It makes perfect sense.
Nice.
So definitely take it, regardless of whether you want to take it with me. The Professional Agile Leadership is a great class, not just for leadership, but for us to help understand what leadership should be doing if we have to go explain to them what they should be doing. So we talk a lot about delegation. Which class did you go through? A PAL, Seth?
No, I didn't. No.
Yeah, you did a PSK Kanban class,
professional Kanban,
and
a PSM.
Yeah, PSM. Yeah. So yeah, I have a lot of fun teaching classes, but we're doing all of them virtual at the moment, obviously, and I'm feeling like I like the virtual way of delivering. Scrum.org has found that there's a 6% higher pass rate for the assessments with folks taking the virtual classes. We're not sure yet why that's the case, but I would assert, if you've seen my LinkedIn posts, I've been posting some of the awesome murals that my groups have been creating in the Scrum classes, and the ability to create all of those things, having those big wall exercises without having to fight to get access and see the wall is unbelievably powerful. And we PDF them at the end of the class. Everybody gets a copy. I think that's why there's a greater degree of learning in the virtual classes, even though you've got kids running about in the background and all kinds of things going on. It's all good. It's all part of the fun. And I think that it's the new normal. I think we're going to be doing virtual deliveries and working from home a lot more than we ever did before.
Yeah.
So I had to change my website.
Fair enough. Can't argue with that. Got a couple other ones for you, then I'll
40 flights a year, Seth, pal.
Say again?
Before lockdown, I was doing 140 flights a year.
Oh, I remember, yeah.
About 300 days a year, and doing about 16 different countries a year, 34 countries in the last 10 years.
Mm.
So I would prefer not to travel so much.
No, I can imagine. So I've got a couple other, and then we'll wrap up. But so can you talk a little bit about Agile folk calling each other's work BS, right? When perhaps the small steps are invisible to people looking obviously from the outside in, and people from the inside the org who've obviously worked, well, the phrase is worked their butts off, can relate to that, to shift the org and move things forward a little bit closer to where they want to get to, right? But there is a lot of that out there. What's your perspective on that?
I think we do a lot of work to slowly move organizations. I've been working with a company called Schlumberger. I worked with them for 4 years to organize one team. It was 600 people, but one product into some semblance of having the same source control system, having the same work item tracking system, just having some standards across their organization. It took them 4 years to get there. That sometimes things just take a long time. Cultural change is hard, but I think what is it? It's the Cotter model that says the biggest danger is declaring victory early. If we call what we're doing agile and it's not, we're declaring victory early while we've not finished the fight. And when we declare victory early,
isn't it?
Complacent.
Yeah.
People get complacent and stop trying because, oh, we've won, so we don't have to do any more work. I think we need to stop talking about transformation and start talking about evolution. Where are we on our agile evolution? We might not be, we either are or are not at agility yet, or this list that I have is just one organization's definition of what agility is. Don't take it and look at your own stuff and go, well, I'm not agile then. You need to decide where you are on your journey towards agility, your evolution. And it's a continuous path that never ends. So there will always be changes, always be improvements. I personally like this litmus test of, can this organization say that they're agile or not? Am I looking at that and they're declaring victory? No, it's not true. I'm going to buy a I'm going to give you a bunch of money to build me a product, and you're telling me you're agile? How can I tell if you're lying? Why should I have to know? Why should I have to expect that you would be lying? But that's what's happening for organizations. How many what's the term? Consulting organizations like the Accentures, the
management consultants.
Yeah, so those sorts of organizations, how many of them would you consider to actually be agile, or just effectively taking the piss from their customers and saying whatever they need, their customer needs to hear in order to win that contract? I mean, that's really where this focus is. If you're working inside of an organization and you have a team and you're providing services, this is not your litmus test. This is a litmus test for an organization spending more than $800 billion on buying stuff. Yeah, they need to make sure that they're spending the money effectively, and their folks don't know whether those organizations are telling them the truth. That's why this litmus test exists. So definitely don't use the same measure as say for the Spotify model. Don't just take this as rote. Make your own assessment. This is just one example. I don't know if that answered the question. I tried my best.
Yeah, it's good answer.
Or maybe I could just say, I'm not pooping all over your attempts to make your organization more agile. I'm just maybe pooping over saying it's agile if it's not. That's maybe what I'm saying.
Okay. Would you consider the SpaceX as an agile company? Because they would fail the 6-question test. Quite like that. So
yeah. Agile programming teams followed by linear bureaucratic deployments is a failure because they're deploy. So yeah, I'm not going to hold them to the same. If you are working within an organizational context, which SpaceX is one such organizational context, where it's not a possibility to be, you don't have your rocket in space every 30 days, but maybe they'll get there. Isn't that their plan? Like a continuous delivery of, they're going to be launching on a regular cadence. They're increasing that cadence. I don't know. Maybe you could say they're still on their evolution. They're not at this measure of agility, but they're doing super, super well at everything else. So I wouldn't poop all over them for not meeting one of these requirements if they are doing so awesome anyway, if that makes sense. You have to look at the value delivery in your organization. It's agility is not the goal. I think that's something that folks often miss or misinterpret, but the goal is not to be agile. The goal is to have an awesome business that does well and provides your customers.
Meet your customers' needs, right?
Meet your customers' needs, yeah. And meet them well. You want delighted customers. I don't know, does SpaceX have delighted customers? If they do, they're doing awesome. I don't care what measure you use against them. They're doing awesome. If they don't have delighted customers, then maybe they're doing something wrong. I don't think it's as easy as that.
No. So, okay, we'll take a couple more, then we'll wrap up. There's a couple other good ones coming. So if you were to give one piece of advice to an individual whose company exec says that they are agile, but everyone on the ground knows that's not the case, what would you say to them?
I would say email that executive the Detecting Agile BS document. Just email it to them. Print it out, leave it next to the executive bathrooms. I don't know. That person, that executive, needs educated. Yeah, they're ignorant on that topic, and I think this document makes people think. Its title is deliberately, pushing that, and that's why I used it in it. I want to make people think. Don't just assume you're agile. Think about it. And I think that one piece of advice is send them a link to this presentation. If it's too long, maybe I could do a shorter one for you. Yeah, but sending them a link to the document has a lot more in it. Honestly, I really recommend perusing this document. It has lots of useful things in it. It talks about DevOps. It talks about continuous delivery. It talks about feature flags. It talks about controlled exposure to production. It talks about a lot of things that are part of our new modern software engineering practices that we really should be encouraging, moving towards, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I would definitely print off a copy, leave it in the executive bathrooms. That's definitely my recommendation.
It's subtle.
Yeah, it sometimes it's not subtle, but put it on his desk when he's not there. He comes back. What's this thing? Oh, detecting agile BS. Oh, maybe that. Oh shit. That is us. Okay, well maybe I need to make some changes. Maybe I need to do stuff. A lot of the time it's because shareholders are measuring organizations based on some of these ideas as well, because shareholders don't understand. They just want their money. So, well, we know we'll get more money if it's an agile organization, so you should be agile. So the CEO goes, okay, we're agile now. That's the declaring it too early.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a good answer, but it was an answer.
It's one approach, right?
And I like John's comment. Thank you. Most of my time has been adding transparency. That's what we're always doing in organizations. That's really the only thing that matters. Creating transparency. If things are transparent, if problems are transparent, people will do something about them. I like to think of sometimes my job is just to shine a torch in the dark at the thing that we need to go fix and keep shining it even when people think it's fixed already or don't want to deal with it. That's shine a light in the dark.
I'm going to make this the last one. Are you familiar with, is it Krulak's laws of leadership? I am not.
No, but now that somebody has mentioned them, I will go Google it.
This is my favorite thing about these events. Every week I learn something new. How good is that? So Krulak's laws of leadership. I genuinely I've never heard of that.
I just put it on the screen. Krulak's law of leadership states that the future of an organization is in the hands of the privates in the field, not the generals back home. In our quickly developing world, supporting or your leaders need to nurture. Yeah, I totally agree. So I didn't know what it was, but I totally agree with it.
Which laws would you follow? So there are obviously a number of them. So yeah, that definitely requires a little bit more digging into it.
We need to. I agree with what I just read. Let's put it that way.
Thank you for that, John. That's opened us up to something new this evening. So that's awesome.
New that we can go research and read, and maybe I'll incorporate it into my Agile leadership class.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Part of the fun. Yeah.
Right. It's okay. We've got about 10 minutes. I think you fielded many questions this evening, as you always do, and it's been excellent, and we learned something new. So that's really cool. So just to say thanks. It's great to have you along again, as always. Great talk. I've seen it before, and slight different twist on it. So that was pretty awesome. It felt slightly shorter. I think you took a few bits out. Did you know? Last time I saw you do it, it was a little bit longer. There was more slides.
I don't like slides anymore.
Oh, is that what it is?
I'm trying to do less slides and more discussions and content and stuff. I've been teaching. I've always been a slide monkey for teaching my Scrum classes, and I just taught a professional Scrum Foundations class this week with no slides at all. I think I did cheat. I copied some slides into a mural. But there was maybe only 6 or 7 things I copied across. Out of the slide deck has something like 300 slides in it. But I did everything as interactive exercises from end to end and discussion. So yeah, that's a lot of fun.
Great. Well, good to have you along. Thanks for being with us, and hopefully we might see you again sometime. So,
yeah, absolutely. I have other talks.
Yeah, because I can't see anybody else. I'll give you a little round of applause there. It's just very different UI than what we're used to, which is cool. But listen.
And I would be interested in folks' feedback on the experience, because this looks like a great tool. It actually supports up to 20,000 participants, 20,000 attendees. Which is a little bit more than Zoom, but maybe it's not as interactive because we don't have the ability for other people to mute. Yeah. But then maybe it's better because you get to pick and choose the questions. I don't know. I would be interested in feedback.
Pros and cons, I would say. Pros and cons.
Yeah, exactly.
No, thank you everyone for joining. We did try this little experiment. So as Martin says, the team and I would be really keen to get your thoughts and your feedback. We're always happy to try things. We'll be back to Zoom next week. You'll be glad to know. So yeah, thanks for joining us. Keep the feedback coming, and yeah, that's us bringing June to a close. And really excited about July. We have 5 sessions for you. That's incredible. There are 5 Wednesdays in July. Can you believe that, Martin? So we have 5 events for you, and we start off next week with Tendai Vicky, who joins us to talk about innovation and transformation. This talks about intrapreneurs can drive transformation. It's really cool. He's just released a new book, Pilots in the Navy. He's a really insightful, interesting chap. So do tune in for that if that's of interest to you. And we have a whole host of other ones. While Martin was kindly presenting his content, I was publishing one of our outstanding events for July, which is with Stephen Wendell, who'll be joining us from the States. He's also got a new book out on really cool behavioural stuff and research he does. Really, again, a really insightful man with some really, really good content and interesting ideas to support the way we work. So yeah, hope you'll join us for that. Community shout outs, our friends at ScotViz. I've got their next meetup on Tuesday, I believe it is, on the 30th. Tendai will join us on the Wednesday, and our friends at Lean Agile Edinburgh have their next event on the Thursday. And I think that's about Agile HR. So again, if that's of interest, sign up for that. And yeah, thanks again for joining us. Really enjoyed hosting Martin again. And we hope we'll see you again. And yeah, thanks and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you for listening, everybody. Thank you.
Right, you end this, do I end this? What's that end? Big red end button. Is that the one, is it? I can't hear you now.